Welcome back. In this video, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about particle shading and rendering in Exercise 7. Exercise 7 comes with some brand new nodes and shaders that we can use to make some awesome particle effects using volumetric shaders. So let's have a look at how to use these and how to apply them to a particle cloud example. Let's hit Control O to open up the load scene browser, and the scene you want to open up is particle shading start. So let's open that scene up. And what we have here, if we hit play, is a pretty simple, straightforward particle system. And we're going to go ahead and use this as our little test guinea pig here to render out our volume effects. Pretty simple scene. We just have three lights up here. And then we have our particles. If we render right now, we'll see what we have by default. And this is what we have when we perform a render region with the current settings. We can see the particles and they're being rendered out as spheres, exactly what we would expect. But there's a problem. They're rendering out with the default scene material, the Phong material. So it doesn't look too great, especially if we're trying to do an effect like smoke or fog or mist or clouds or anything like that. Anything that's a volumic effect, we're not going to be able to achieve with just a Phong shader. So let's cancel out the render region. Let's select the particle cloud and apply a new material to it. Let's do that very easily by going up to the main menu bar up here. Let's go to the model menu. Go down under the Get menu, go to Material, and then in this new sub-menu, go ahead and select, say, a Lambert material. Really doesn't matter which material you pick from there because we're going to go ahead and change things around anyway. And with the point cloud selected, hit 7 on the keyboard to open up the render tree. Let's rename our material here to, we'll just call it Cloud Material, because it's a point cloud, so we'll just go ahead and do that. Okay, so here's our Lambert. It's not going to help us very much for doing any type of really good particle effects. So what we need to do is use some of the new nodes that are included with Exercise 7 to render out particles. Let's click on this little Earth icon right here to open up the Preset Manager. And it should automatically take you to the Shaders category here. If not, up here in the upper left button, we have Shaders, we have Ice Nodes, and we have Materials. We want to go ahead and work with shaders. So make sure you're in Shaders mode here. And what we want to do is go down to the particle category, and here you'll find a number of different nodes and shaders that we can use for rendering out particle clouds in Exercise 7. So let's start to grab some of these nodes and get this point cloud to render out the way that we want. Edit that out of the video. 3, 2, 1. So let's go ahead and start grabbing some of these nodes over here and start to create ourselves a shader network to render this out nicely with Mental Ray. The first node we want to use is the particle volume node. So let's grab that and drag it down here. Now the particle volume node is a volumetric shader, so you can't plug it into the surface, the shadow, or the photon ports of the material node. You can only go ahead and plug it into the volume port of the material node, so let's go ahead and do that. Once we do that, let's go ahead and render out the particle cloud, and you'll notice that we get something very strange. It renders out as this giant volumetric cube. Looks interesting, but not exactly the effect that we were going for. Well, essentially what this node does, very quickly, just to let you know what's going on here, this node goes ahead and it applies a volumetric shader effect to the point cloud. Pretty simple. But we don't have anything so far that's telling the point cloud what shape to take when it renders out, which is why it renders out as that giant cube that you saw. So let's go back to the Preset Manager and grab ourselves a node that will help to determine the shape for the particle volume cloud. We'll grab ourselves the particle density node up here, and we'll drag and drop that into our render tree. Okay? Now the particle density node is going to go ahead and give the overall shape to the particle volume cloud. So how do we do that? Up here we see a density output port in green. Let's click on that and drag it and connect it to the particle volume cloud. Now the node that we want to connect it to, or the port that we want to connect it to, is the density port. So it's very easy to remember. All you do is connect from density to density. Really doesn't get simpler than that. And now if we render again, we now gave some shape to our particles. So it looks much better. Looks kind of fluffy, kind of like a soft cloud or whatnot. So how do we refine this further and control the shape even more? Well, the particle volume cloud is going to give the volumic effect to the point cloud. particle density node is going to give the overall shape to the point cloud. So what kind of node can we use to refine the particle density and give it a more refined shape? Well, we have a couple of new nodes in exercise 7 that can help us do that. In the preset manager, we'll go to the texture category and we'll have two brand new nodes here, Cell Scalar and Fractal Scalar. These two nodes can be used in combination, or you can use either one by itself to control the shape and the look of your particle clouds. So let's select the Cell Scalar, hold down Control and select the Fractal Scalar, and drag and drop both of them at the same time inside of the render tree here. Okay, so here's our two nodes. Okay, we're going to edit that out of the video because there was a goddamn phone ringing in the background. And I have to burp. Okay. Hang on. Okay, I'm ready. So we'll start again in 3, 2, 1. So again, the way this works is pretty simple. The particle volume cloud gives the volume effect, particle density gives the overall shape, and then we can use the Cell Scalar and Fractal Scalar shaders to refine and control the more detailed look of the particles in the point cloud. So let's go ahead and try this out. We'll start off with the Cell Scalar node here. Simply drag its output port over the particle density shader, and we can connect it to several different ports here. What we're going to go ahead and connect it to is the shape density. So let's connect it to the shape density, and in the render region we can see it update, and now we get a much different effect. Now we can see that the actual particles are now being rendered out a little bit differently. They're starting to take on a new shape. They're starting to look more detailed. They're starting to look completely different. So by using these nodes, you can change the look and the detail level of the particles in your point cloud. Let me close the preset manager, and let me also close the render region there. I want to show you something else here when working with this. If we open up the Cell Scalar node, we get all these parameters here in these different tabs. At first glance, it can be pretty awkward and pretty unknown to you how these parameters are going to affect the point cloud, unless if you're constantly doing render regions and then changing the setting and so on and so forth. But that can be a little bit time consuming. So one little shortcut method, one neat technique that you can use is if we hover over the Cell Scalar or even over the Fractal Scalar and most shaders inside the render tree, you notice this little icon pops up in the upper right. It's a great little circle with the letter V inside of it. If you click on that, you create this shader ball preview. It's 2D preview of whatever node it is that you clicked on. In this case, the Cell Scalar. What this allows you to do is to interactively change these settings and see them update in this shader ball preview. Essentially, it allows you to see what the changes you make in the PPG over here on the right and how they're going to affect the Cell Scalar node over here on the left. So we can change some of these settings around and so on and so forth and make some pretty drastic changes here. Maybe change the scaling of this. Lower the scaling and make the effect larger, or increase the size of the scale and make this effect look more congested, more dense. And then what we can do is once we put some of those settings together, we can do a render region and see how it affects our overall cloud. So it's a pretty neat way of working. It lets you work a little bit quicker because, of course, performing render regions every time you make a change here is a little bit more time consuming than if you were just rendering out this shader ball preview here. So you can see how these changes we're making here to the Cell Scalar node is affecting the shape and the look of the particles in the point cloud. So let's close those two and the render region, and we'll disconnect the Cell Scalar node simply by left clicking and dragging away that little connection port right there. Now let's have a look at the Fractal Scalar. The Fractal Scalar works the same way, only instead of using a cell shape, it uses a fractal shape. So let's go ahead and connect it to the shape density. Let's open up the Fractal Scalar node here, and we'll also create a little render preview for it, and this is what our fractal effect looks like here. Let's go ahead and conduct a render region here, and this is what we have. What we can do is start to do a few different things here, like for example change the contrast of the fractal effect over here. So we can increase color 1 and decrease color 2 until we get sort of this even gray effect. We have very little contrast now, And if we go ahead and perform a render region, we're going to see the effect here. Doesn't look as noisy as before. It almost looks like we don't even have the fractal effect at all. It looks just like the particle density is working by itself. And then of course we can increase that contrast by a lot and make this look a little bit more detailed or whatnot. We can go to texture support and we can go ahead and increase the scale to make the effect a little bit noisier, and you can see it's noisier in the render region. So we have a lot of options, a lot of different things that we can do here to change the look of these particles just by using the fractal and the cell scalar shaders. So they're extremely useful, and you really do need them when working here with these volume shaders. Okay, I'm going to end this video here, and in the next video we're going to focus mainly on this particle volume cloud node right here. There's some important parameters in here if we open up this particle volume cloud, and you probably also noticed in this video that I did skip going over any of the parameters in the PPG for the particle volume cloud shader, and I did that on purpose because I just wanted to show you how to get it up and running as quickly as possible. So the idea is just to get you acquainted with it and get your feet wet and get you working with it as quickly as possible. In the next video, we're going to go ahead and sit down and have a closer, more detailed look at this particle volume cloud shader and go ahead and dig in through some of these different PPG tabs here and check out some of the different settings that we can use to control the look of the particle volume cloud, but in particular how it shades, how it renders, and how fast or slow it renders, and the quality and things like that. Okay, so we'll talk about that in the next video.